Ever catch yourself wondering what makes people choose one medication over another? Like, what's going on in their heads? Well, get this. Today's deep dive is all about that, and we're going deep into the world of language analysis to try to unpack the psychology of Ozempic users. We're talking specifically about what sets them apart from folks who might prefer other similar medications. And we've got two really interesting sources for this deep dive. First up, a marketing analysis report really digs into Ozempic's branding, and then this is cool, a whole guide to understanding brand personality through this tool called Receptiviti.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. And before we get too far, I just want to say this is not about, judging anyone's healthcare choices or anything like that. It's more about using language to try to understand the why people make the choices they do. So, for example, the report actually found this really interesting trend. People who had like negative experiences with Ozempic, they were actually more into the potential rewards, less worried about the risks than people who had bad experiences with Saxenda, which is another medication in the same class.
Hmm. That is interesting. It makes you wonder if that difference in risk tolerance could be because of how these medications are marketed. The report actually suggests that Ozempic's messaging, it tends to really focus on those positive outcomes, like the weight loss, the blood sugar control, all that good stuff. And it kind of downplays the potential downsides a little bit.
Right, totally. It's like focus on the positive. And it seems like that difference in messaging is actually reflected in the language that the users use themselves when they're describing their experiences. The report actually highlights that in general, Ozempic users seem to use language that focuses more on feeling empowered, like they're more in control of their health. There's even this one quote from a user. They said, "So far, my appetite is controlled, my diabetes is under control, and I am losing weight."
Hmm.
Hmm. You just like feel that sense of agency.
Absolutely. And, that actually brings us to, I think, a really crucial point, which is that language can be a window into people's, like, deeper motivations. It's not just about the words themselves, but it's the way that people use them, the nuances, the framing. So while Ozempic users seem to be drawn to this, like personal control, Saxenda users, on the other hand, they tend to use language that emphasizes community more, like shared experiences in their reviews. They talk a lot about their doctor's guidance or how their friends and family reacted to their weight loss.
Yeah, it's like they're finding validation from like their support system,
Mm.
which is kind of heartwarming when you think about it. But it also makes you think, if we can get these kinds of insights just from medication reviews, imagine what we could learn from analyzing language in other contexts. Like, what about social media? And that's where this receptivity thing comes in. It analyzes brand language across all these different platforms to try to figure out these fascinating insights. Like, for example, they discovered that Airbnb's communication style, it uses way more positive language, like cheerful, sociable language compared to Verbo. And it makes sense when you think about it, right? Because Airbnb is all about belonging.
Exactly. And what's really interesting is seeing how a brand's language is different or how it stays the same across all these different platforms. Like, do their tweets have the same tone as their customer service emails?
Yeah.
Those sorts of things. Because if there are differences, it could mean there's a gap between how they're presenting themselves and how they're actually interacting with people.
It's not just about the overall tone, though, right? This
Yeah.
receptivity thing, it like goes deeper, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah, definitely. It can actually go way beyond just like these general personality things. Receptivity uses all these different metrics to analyze language.
Mm-hmm.
One of the ones that I thought was really interesting is this thing called, get this, allure.
Allure.
Yeah, so allure, it basically measures how much a brand uses language that's like attention grabbing. So think like clickbaity headlines or ads that are just like, you know, overflowing with superlatives. Those would be like high on the allure scale.
Oh, interesting. So you could use this to kind of see through the hype. Just by looking at their language, you could tell if a company's actually like walking the walk.
Yeah, exactly. It's a pretty powerful tool for sure. But you know what I think is even more interesting?
What's that?
I think it's even more interesting how this kind of analysis can actually be used to understand people on an individual level.
Oh, okay. So like how our language choices actually reveal stuff about us, like our values or our motivations, things like that.
Exactly. And one of the coolest ways that they're doing this is with something called psycholinguistic clustering.
Psycholinguistic clustering. Okay. I'm going to be honest, that sounds kind of complicated.
Yeah, I know, right? It sounds really technical, but it's actually pretty simple.
Okay, good.
Basically, they use language analysis to group people together based on these like shared psychological traits.
So instead of just using the typical demographics, like age or location,
Yeah.
this uses language to get a more, I don't know, a more like accurate or insightful picture of who people are.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you're getting this peek beneath the surface to try to understand how people think,
Mm.
what motivates them, how they might behave in certain situations. And what's really cool is this isn't just, some futuristic sci-fi thing. It's actually being used right now.
Oh, wow, really? Like how?
So there was this one study I thought was super fascinating where they were analyzing Reddit posts from doctors and nurses.
Yeah.
And just by looking at their language, the researchers were actually able to group them into these 4 distinct clusters. And each of these clusters had its own set of like personality traits and communication styles.
Just from their writing. That's wild. What kind of groups were there?
So there were these like independent and resilient pragmatists.
Mhm.
They were really big on like direct communication and really focused on, finding those practical solutions. And then there were these like charismatic and cheerful achievers.
Okay.
And they were all about, optimism and collaboration and like inspiring other people.
It's amazing how language can show those kinds of differences, like how people approach their work, even if they're in the same profession. That's really interesting. So I'm guessing knowing about these clusters would be really helpful in a lot of different situations.
Oh, for sure. Think about it. Like, imagine if you could understand a doctor's communication style, like how they approach medicine. That could be so helpful. Like, you could tailor those patient interactions. You could make the communication better between the doctor and the patient. You could even personalize their treatment plan.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Wow. This is really making me think differently about words. It's like they're not just how we communicate, but they're like little clues about our personalities.
That's a great way to put it. And the more we understand about that connection between language and, psychology,
Hmm.
who knows what we could learn.
Okay, so we talked about how this kind of analysis can be used to understand medication users and how to analyze brand personalities and even how to like group medical professionals based on how they communicate. But it feels like we're just scratching the surface here. Like, what other areas could use this kind of deep dive into language?
Oh, tons. Like, think about customer service. Imagine if you could analyze what a customer is saying to figure out how frustrated they are,
Hmm.
or to figure out how to respond to them based on their personality.
Oh, that's interesting. Or what about marketing and advertising? Like, companies could use this to totally change how they target their messages.
For sure. Imagine making marketing campaigns that really connect with people, not just appealing to what they want, but also their values. That would be huge.
This whole conversation has been really eye-opening. It makes you really stop and think about what your words are saying about you, not just for yourself, but also for how other people see you.
Right. It's a good reminder that everything you say, every email, every post, it all kind of builds this picture of who you are.
It's like we're all writing our own psych profiles without even realizing it.
That's an interesting way to think about it, and it really makes you wonder, what would your language say about you?
Whoa, that's a good question. I'm gonna have to think about that one. Well, this has been a wild ride, exploring the world of language analysis. And, it's incredible how much we can learn about each other just from paying attention to the words we use. So until next time, keep those conversations going. And remember, every word tells a story.